Hello. Um, First, by way of introduction, here I'm talking about the book Intentional Living, a personal development plan for the experience phase by Evan Raymer. This title is pretty descriptive by itself, and if I had to summarize this book in a few sentences, it would be to introduce the concept of dedicated phases, which is essentially to identify a specific purpose and spend a block of time focusing on that purpose. For instance, to focus on spirituality, health, family, career, or in this case, experience. The author argues that breaking one's life down into dedicated phases imparts a certain sense of meaning to life, encourages focus, enables a person to better succeed at fulfilling their goals by simplifying and narrowing things down. The specific phase addressed by this book is, of course, the experience phase, which is essentially a time to focus on experiences for their own sake, focusing on stimulation, excitement, challenging oneself, and actually following through on all of those things that you've always said, oh, that would be cool to go do, and actually going out and doing them. The author covers lots of good practical advice, like always challenging oneself to get outside one's comfort zone, as well as laying down criteria to decide whether an experience phase is right for you at this time. And of course, tips to make the most of your experience phase if you decide to embark on one. Now, if I had to make a sales pitch for this book, it would be, if you have a girthy and varied bucket list, if you think there's lots of different places to see and lots of different people to meet, or even if you're just unsure of what to do next, or you don't feel like settling down just yet, read this book. It has lots of gems from the author's own experiences that'll enrich your adventures, and it might give you the push you need to go out. Now, when I started to read this book, maybe 20 pages in or so, I started to panic, thinking about my own life and how to define it, and promptly put the book down, even though I had agreed to write a review about it. I mention this reaction because I think it highlights my greatest criticism of the book, which is that I found it too abstract and prescriptive. I think that there is a distinct difference between hearing advice on the one hand and actually realizing or internalizing advice that you've heard through your own experiences. In this sense, I think that the author focused too much on the finished product or the gems of wisdom he had gained through his experiences, and didn't focus enough on the process or the actual experiences he had. My favorite parts of the book were actually when the author related his own experiences and what they taught him. And while many of the pieces of advice provided were accompanied by stories or experiences that the author had, I feel like it was weighted a little bit too heavily towards the advice and not enough towards the episodes or experiences that led to certain realizations. Now, I mention this because I think that when one reads Intentional Living, it's easy to take it for a blueprint for one's own experience phase, which it isn't, and I don't think the author intends it to be. But due to its abstract nature and the weighting of advice over concrete stories, it does sometimes feel this way. Instead, I would encourage the reader to view Intentional Living as a product of a person, as a product of a set of experiences, and most importantly, as a distinct philosophy worthy of consideration. Thanks.